Hi and welcome today to our discussion with Emily Moore, who's at Slalom with us, and also we are joined with our extra special guest who is Diana, who also happens to be Emily's mum. We're going to get to Diana's career a little bit later. My name's Nick Jones and I'll be your host today. I'm also here as a double act to make sure there's no family feuds at the end of today. But jokes aside, I'd like to kick off with yourself, Emily, if you could explain your role today and how you got to this place in your career.
Okay, thanks Nick. So I am currently in the data and analytics team at Slalom. I'm a consultant here, specifically looking after our Tableau practice. But I didn't start out wanting a career in tech. I actually went to uni to study human physiology because I really wanted to be a doctor when I was younger. But then when I finished my degree, I just really wanted to get a job, be a proper person, not a student anymore. And I ended up working for this company as a project manager, but they got Tableau and I'd been working on different like reporting elements in spreadsheets and stuff. So I put my hand up, I was like, I really want this tool, I want to learn it. And I was lucky that they supported me with that decision. They could see that I was good at it, I really enjoyed it, and it just sort of grew from there. And I'm really happy that, you know, I took that decision and pitched for that Tableau license to start with, because I'm really happy with where I've ended up.
Awesome. So not starting in tech, but somehow navigating into it.
Yes.
Diana, are you surprised at all that Emily has ended up in a role in tech?
No, it would never have occurred to me that there was any reason she couldn't have ended up in tech. I mean, when Emily first left university, she worked for a meat producing company, didn't you, in the office, which we always knew she was going to hate. But and then she went to work for a translations company, but in the biomedical sciences division. And that seemed so bizarre to me because she'd had so much trouble with literary sort of things, English, and that to end up in a translation company seemed bizarre.
That was actually something that people commented on. Because I'm dyslexic and I struggled with the sort of English side, I was always very good at maths and science. When I started at the translation company, people actually were like, wow, you're dyslexic and you work here? Like, what's going on there?
The dyslexia one's an interesting one, and actually specifically we're trying to talk about gender today, but I actually wanted to talk about a little bit dyslexic. My sister's also got dyslexia, and I always comment on like how she's got such an amazing memory for stuff, but she consumes an enormous amount of information, which is usually data-based. But what she always struggles with is the articulation of storytelling around that. But I always think it's such a superpower having that sort of dyslexic mindset. Can you reflect a little bit on why you think dyslexia might be a good fit with tech?
Yeah, I've always felt that way. I think when I was younger and in school, it was obviously a struggle, because when you're at school, you have to do subjects like English and you're not allowed to just do the things that complement the way your brain works. But as I got older and I was able to focus on the things like maths that I was very good at, I was very good at physics and stuff at school too. And the data stuff just sort of fits into that. And it's just, that is how my brain works. And actually, I think to a certain extent, I find that sort of stuff maybe easier than someone who didn't have the sort of dyslexic mindset.
Awesome. Diana, if I could reflect a little bit on your career for a moment, and you gave me a bit of a preview before we rolled cameras today, about where you started out and how you found your passion towards tech. Could you maybe explain to us where you started and where you found out?
I left school early because I hated school. I went to work at the Ministry of Defence in the solid state physics department, and I did a day release study course. And I actually wanted to do a microbiology unit, but work wouldn't let me because it was nothing to do with solid state physics. They said I had to do the computing. But when I started doing that, I found I just had a real aptitude for it, and I was doing everybody else's programming homework and swapping it for their chemistry homework, say. So that's how it started. And then I got transferred into an embryonic speech research team, developing speech research in the late 70s. That would have been when it was a new idea and nobody thought it was going to work. And most of that was programming. So they taught me to program really at work.
Was programming a bit of an unusual thing then to even be talking about, I guess, regardless of gender?
Oh yeah, I can remember when programmes were on paper tape and rolls and people's life's work would be in a big metal filing cabinet with elastic bands around the rolls of tape.
And now it's such a micro, not even a non-existing entity.
It's changed beyond all recognition.
What was the gender ratio when you were first working in programming?
I'm desperately trying to remember how many women there were. When I got my first commercial programming job, I remember there being a whole department, and I think I can remember 4 women on the technical side. So there must have been 30, 50 men. There weren't any women in senior roles. We were all programmer type people.
And where ultimately did programming then take you in your career? I think you mentioned about going to more commercial programming.
Yeah, that with commercial was a manufacturing company, and that was when there was like 30, 40 men and 4 women, and I got this sort of harebrained idea that I was going to come to London and make my fortune. So I got a job in London and came to work, and there were more women in technical roles there, and they seemed to be more respected. Whereas I thought when I worked in this company in Worcestershire, we were sort of treated as a necessary irritation somehow.
Interesting.
And that's the role I had there was when my boss actually said to me after I started that I'd been there a couple of weeks, that he'd been disappointed when he found out he was going to get a woman, but actually I wasn't too bad.
Oh.
So
How kind.
Yeah, I was going to say, Emily, I don't think you'd accept that sort of statement today.
These days you wouldn't be allowed to say that, would you? But I mean, in those days that was considered a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't think, like, people these days don't think that, right? Like, well, hopefully they don't think that. They see that there's a woman joining their team and they don't go, oh no, a woman.
But back in those days, it was very much the case that once you had children, you stopped work. And I think the attitude was that why would you bother training a woman, because she's just going to clear off and have babies.
Interesting. And I remember you saying
and
something
it was
about...
perfectly acceptable to say that.
Right, it was perfectly acceptable. And then your own mother as well, I think you said something about, what was her kind of like work trajectory?
Well, she worked at the Ministry of Defence straight after the war, which is where she met my father. And when she and my father married, my mum was the first woman they'd had at that site who'd carried on working part-time after she was married, because back in the late 50s it was accepted that women would leave work and look after their husbands once they got married.
Awesome. And then, so the reason why I find that so interesting is you can kind of see like the generational changes that have led to this wonderful person who I'm sure you're very, very proud of.
Yeah.
Were you conscious of tech, and like there's often things said around, you know, tech being more of like a boys thing, or boys are just naturally more attracted to tech? Were you conscious of like the concept of tech, and how much were you involved in it, you know, from an early age?
Well, I mean, I was aware. Both my parents are computer programmers, so not just mum, but my dad too. And I remember I used to go spend time with them at the office during school holidays and things like that, and I was aware of what they did. I mean, from a school perspective, I don't think I ever shied away from anything because it was like seen as a boy thing. I just did the things that I was good at and I enjoyed. I do remember when I did A-level physics, there were only 2 women in my class, well, girls that we were then, out of a class of at least 20 students. And actually there were no girls in the computer science class. I remember the computer science A-level was all boys, which is funny because now I'm doing a computer science master's. So maybe if that was, you know, something that I'd had a little bit more exposure to when I was younger. But then obviously, like, I was aware of it because both my parents did computer programming. I never considered doing it at school though, I don't know why.
that early rebellion of like, no, I won't do that if you're doing this.
I do think that when I was younger, the fact that both my parents were computer programmers actually put me off. Because I remember going to see it, and like my dad would work in front of this black screen with like coding on it, and I was like, that's not for me. And all my life my dad has told me you'd be a brilliant computer programmer. And now we have conversations about it and he's like, told you so. So you've ended up exactly where I said. But I mean, I was very lucky in that both my parents have always actively encouraged me to do the things that I'm good at. And they would never have said to me something like, oh, well, that's something boys do. You know, that was never told to me at home. So I've always just done what I wanted, and I've always had their full support. So
awesome. So gender norms, I think, like in terms of stereotyping, etc., seem to be kind of non-existent in your household, which is awesome, because I feel like that then explains how Emily felt, despite studying something else, felt free to kind of make a career change into tech. What would be your advice to other parents or anyone perhaps in your shoes today? What would be your advice on how to kind of encourage young girls to embrace tech, should they show the aptitude?
Well, I think with Emily it was very much a case that we always said to you to do what you found interesting and good at, because there's no point banging your head against the brick wall trying to do something that's doesn't come easily to you. You know, just setting yourself up for a lot more work. And just so happened that she was that way inclined.
I think as well with my dyslexia, I think it's like it's almost, you cling on to those things that you're good at as well, right? I think when I was first assessed for dyslexia, I was 8 years old or something, and they caught it, my parents caught it very early. They could see something was wrong. But my teacher at the time honestly thought I was stupid. Like, that's what she said to them. So at that point, you know, you're worried that you're not going to succeed at anything. So to have these things that actually I was really good at. I mean, for me, what I would say to people is just like challenge your own thinking. Like if you have a daughter and they want to do something and you're like pulling away from them doing that, just question it in your head. Like, is that because you associate that with something that boys do? And actually, if you just challenge that thinking and let the child do what they want to do, then that's going to be what ultimately ends up being best for them, because those are the things that they'll enjoy.
So in summary, I can definitely see something kind of emerging here in terms of there was definitely ignore the gender norms, roll your sleeves up, you can do this. But I think there's actually something really special, and obviously Dad's not with us today, but if he was here, I think I'd probably be shaking his hand along with yours as well, Diana, and that you have created a very safe space for Emily, and also such an advocate, as I think many parents are, when you may be struggling with actually what wasn't a gender-based thing, it was something around, you know, your own dyslexia and overcoming that. So I think actually supporting your child, looking for alternatives, and maybe quietly waiting to see when they finally work out exactly what you know is a truth, and then you get that all-inspiring moment when your dad get to say, "I told you so."
He says that a lot.
So don't put that in the... I won't be able to send him the video.
Okay, I've got one final, probably the most controversial question. Who out of the two of you, I'm going to start with you, because I think, Emily, you might tell me the truth. Who out of the two of you is the best at tech? And I mean, like, something breaks, it's got to be fixed.
Oh, I don't know, because I think we do such different types of tech. I wouldn't know where to start at all with the sort of programming that Mum used to do on mainframes and stuff. Like that's a complete world away. Although it's the same logical brain. I wouldn't have any clue where to start with a problem in Mum's world.
So we're voting you, Diana.
I think I'm more down in the engine, and Emily's more on the presentation side, aren't you? Or do you think that's not fair? I don't really know what Emily does. She communicates with senior management, doesn't she? And anybody who can do that is good luck to them.
Actually, it's another really good example of how important it is, after you've kind of done the data and analysis stuff, that diversity of thought, actually gender parity in thought, and articulation is actually really, really important, because you don't just have a gender bias on even the articulation and communication of it. And of course, now we're at a stage in 2022 where, going into 2023, that ultimately we make a lot of data-based decisions on a daily basis. So having that diversity of thought, having that ability to talk with senior stakeholders is, I think, super key for making kind of like the right objective decisions, but making sure you're doing it in an inclusive way.
Yeah, and I think that you're saying, like, I know that you feel that you're not very good at that sort of thing, but I also think that when you were working, like you're saying, like, women were treated as an irritation, like you weren't given the opportunity to grow those skills. Like, I've never had anyone not encourage me to grow those skills because I'm a woman, whereas I think that you probably weren't given that sort of same opportunity.
Yes, I think I probably wouldn't have been in that sort of role. I wouldn't have been taken as seriously, and I'm never very confident either, so I like to hide behind my... Whereas Emily's very different in that respect, aren't you?
I don't know, I feel like I've sort of forced myself to get better at these things, because I don't feel like this sort of stuff comes naturally to me either. But it's something that I've sort of worked on, I guess, because I feel like that's how you can sort of advance and grow things. So.
And if I could just close, probably Diana, you've enabled this to also happen as well. So thank you so much for bringing Emily into our lives, and thank you so much for sharing your story today. It's been awesome doing kind of like a multi-generational thing and understanding that story arc. So thank you. And then thank you to everyone who's been listening. I hope you enjoyed what we had to explain to you today. Any other questions or comments on this story in particular, please get in touch, and we'd love to help and support you. Thank you.